Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1000 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. And today we have a Slav defense. The Slav is a weapon that I really like using with the black pieces, mostly because of how well it resembles the Caro Kann. And I like starting with the move c6 rather than d5, because if I start with c6, my opponent can choose to transpose back into a regular Caro Kann. And I would say maybe 30% of the time people do. And if you want to play the Caro Kann, I mean, an extra 30% Caro Kann games, that's a good win. But my opponent goes e3, which is, it is definitely a way to play the Slav. It's just seems like an odd one. And most of the time, I go for e6 and go for the Semi-Slav, because I typically don't like the complications of like bishop f5, cd, and queen to b3, trying to exploit the fact that my b-pawn is weak. So I'm just going to play it in a Semi-Slav structure. I'm not going to pretend like I even know the theory that well in the Slav. I just like to play normal-looking moves and see what kind of game I get. Okay, the computer thinks that this is the main line of the Semi-Slav, so I've done something correctly. And, I mean, what you can do is you can take on c4 immediately and basically say, you know, you wasted a move for bishop d3 because now you're going to have to come to c4. And, you know, if I were to take on c4 immediately and the bishop went from f1 to c4 in one go, then white saves a move, essentially. So what we could do is take on c4, and after bishop takes, go b5, which is a very typical Slav idea. And after like bishop to d3, we can go like a6, bishop b7, knight bd7, castles, and go for c5. That's typically how you play the Slav. We don't have to do that. My opponent could try and play a quick e4, but I'm not really too concerned about that. I'll happily trade with him. I think that's probably beneficial for me. So I'm just going to castle. And there's no bishop to g5 ideas because, of course, e3 has already been played. My opponent may try to go to e4 to liberate this bishop, or he may try to go b3 and fianchetto the bishop. You can kind of do whatever. There's not really like a 100% correct way to play these lines, at least as far as I'm aware, and the Slav has served me pretty well. So, yeah, I am kind of tempted to take. I'm also a little bit concerned about a quick e4, e5 if I take, though. There are some lines, I believe, where you actually push b4 and kick the knight, and then, oh, what's the idea? I did some analysis on this kind of position before. I think I'm supposed to play c5, but I'm not sure when. So I think I'll just go knight bd7 for now. Okay, yeah, this is actually a move. Great. This is the Chigorin defense, apparently. Again, I don't study the main lines of these openings, not the Slav anyway, because I feel like I don't need to. I feel like I can understand the positions and the ideas of the positions well enough to just play natural moves. And that way I also can't really get surprised by opening prep, because I don't have any opening prep. I just play the moves. Yeah, so this is now a Queen's Gambit declined, apparently. So I assume we just take, put the knight on f6, and after the bishop probably goes to c2 to prepare a potential queen d3. We probably just go h6 to stop bishop g5, and then there's no threats on the king. That looks pretty logical. Maybe I should be playing c5 sooner. Not entirely sure, but this can't be wrong. Yeah, bishop goes to c2, of course, trying to set up this battery in conjunction with bishop to g5 to remove my defender off the h7 square. But if I play the move h6, I'm just taking away the g5 square, not only from the knight, but also the bishop. Well, not only from the bishop, but also the knight, because I was talking about the bishop. And now, like, queen d3, it's not really a problem, because my knight defends this square, and it's very difficult for my opponent to remove my knight. c5. I mean, okay. I suppose I was ready to play the move c5 myself, and potentially go like b6, bishop b7, sure. This is odd, though. I'm going to drop my bishop back to c7. I think that's the most natural square. And... what? Really? Okay, I mean, my knight can't move because I'll hang mate in 1. I understand that, but I don't know how my opponent's planning on getting rid of my knight. You can't even go for knight e5 and try and take and have the pawn pressuring my knight, even if I would take. I don't know if I would, because I'd be blocking my bishop in. b6 is very tempting, just to apply pressure to the pawn. And then if, like, take... then I can play e5, right? Then I can play e5. So if b6, b4, a5, a3 can't be played because I'll win your rook. So I should be able to force this d-pawn to c5, and then open up the d-file to facilitate a queen trade, and then I can play e5 and liberate my bishop. That's kind of the point of the Slav, is can you get your bishop... whoops, sorry. Is you play the move c6 and e6 early on to get a really solid center, right? At the cost of your light-squared bishop being a terrible bishop. And then it's, okay, can I now liberate my position and get my bishop out? You can play it in a more aggressive way than I have chose to do. I just like playing it like this because I feel like it's very easy. It's very intuitive. Okay, so yeah, b6, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, c6 is weak, but how is white going to exploit that? This is kind of a non-threat. So, yeah, just b6. Also, apologies if I sound a bit tired today, or a bit less animated than usual. It's like 6 p.m. right now, and I get up at like 5:30 in the morning, so it's late for me. And I just got back from a football game, which went very well, but I'm exhausted. But I do need to get these videos recorded in advance because I'm going away for a few days with my girlfriend. So, I'm going to be trying to make enough videos to keep the daily upload schedule going while I'm gone. So if that doesn't deserve a like and subscribe, I don't know what does. Okay, yeah, my opponent does go b4, but I actually think that creates more problems than it solves. Of course, taking makes no sense because my opponent just takes back, and what have I achieved? I've just isolated my c-pawn. I think that a5 actually poses a lot of problems. I'm going to play it. The point is, you can't play a3. Again, as we've discussed, I will win your rook, or I will just win the pawn. There's also a hidden threat of bishop a6, which isn't initially obvious, but with my move b6, my bishop gains access to a6. With my move a5, my rook gains access to a6, meaning my bishop can go there while being defended. And if my bishop gets to a6, you're losing an exchange. Your queen is also getting forced off of d3, where it's actually a decent piece, controlling a lot of good squares. And white will be completely lost if that were to happen. Now, if my opponent tries to bail out by taking on a5, I can just take on c... well, no, actually, I can just go bishop a6 again, and the queen's under attack. If my opponent takes on b6, with the argument being bishop a6, he can take on c7. I can't take his queen because he'll take my queen. So if that were to happen, I probably just take back with the bishop. This is still a threat. This is still a threat. And my bishop is now very active. But yeah, bishop to b4. And I think my opponent has just completely missed bishop to a6, which should just secure us an exchange. So yeah, let's play it. Let's play it. White can't block. White cannot block. And then it actually gets even better because we'll be able to facilitate more trades of these pawns, opening up our rook. So we'll be an exchange up. That's not the be-all and end-all, though, right? We still need to do stuff and show that our exchange up is worthwhile. If we can open the A file, our rook is more likely to get active more quickly and be felt more quickly. As in, you'll be able to feel that I'm actually up an exchange. Because, like in this position, for example, the only pieces participating in the game are minor pieces and the queens. Obviously the pawns, but they're different, right? The rooks, none of the rooks are doing anything, because all the pawns are in the way, of course. But the idea is, if I can get the pawns out of the way, then my rook versus bishop will be felt better. We technically could throw in a4, because if takes, whoops. But the queen just moves, and why is my pawn on a4? I don't want to lock things up. I want to open things up for my rooks. So we're going to take on f1. I suppose my opponent could take here. But, I mean, I don't see how that helps him, because my bishop's even better on b6, right? This is kind of the problem with my opponent playing c5. Not just that this diagonal opens up. This is a one-off sort of thing. That doesn't happen all the time. It's mostly that if this pawn takes on b6, the d pawn is very weak. My opponent takes with the king. Really? Really? Okay. Queen d5 is very tempting, offering a queen trade. But I assume the queen just goes back to d3. And my queen is very good, but bishop b3 could be annoying. So I think I'll probably just take here. Maybe I should take here first. But then the pawn takes and a5 is a target. So no, I'm just going to take on b4. I think opening up the files as much as possible is my best bet. Yeah, I thought my opponent might do this. So my thinking is, if pawn takes, bishop takes, he attacks my rook. But I just go bishop to d6, and it's really difficult for my opponent to decline the trade of bishops, because if he goes bishop to b6, I think queen b8, and the bishop's in a little bit of trouble. And if it moves, of course, I'll just exchange queens, because I'm up in exchange. I could play the move b5. That actually wouldn't be that silly, because then this bishop sucks, and I have the only good dark square diagonal. My opponent could try and get on this diagonal, but it's not great. I could do that and aim for queen to d5 and try and swarm the d pawn with like rook d8. That's actually quite tempting. I think I'm gonna... What about c6? Well, knight e5, I can always just take it. Also, the d pawn will probably hang. Yeah, let's go b5. It'll be interesting to see what the engine thinks I should do here. Whether I should take, whether I should do nothing. Like, just move the rook, maybe. So that this doesn't come with a double attack, of course. Or whether this was the right approach. I can also actually play bishop to a5 in some lines and try to facilitate a bishop trade, because the only way to decline it would be to go bishop to a3, and in some cases there may be tactics because of the alignment of the rook and the bishop. Okay, I think that it makes sense to go queen d5, and the point is, if my opponent takes, then I can take it with a pawn, or I can take with a knight. Not the c-pawn, because then he gets a passed c-pawn himself. But with the e-pawn to open up the e-file, or with the knight, both are fine. Maybe with the knight, actually, because if takes, then this is under attack, and this is under attack. And the only way to save both would be to play a3, but then I just take, and go rook d8, probably. And the position looks incredibly winning, because I control the only open file, and I'm targeting your pawn, and you don't have knight e5, because I will exchange everything and win the game. So, what if my opponent moves the queen? Well, there's still no threat of mate, because my knight still controls this square. And he would have been losing the a2 pawn. That's the idea, because the rook wasn't watching the a2 pawn anymore, right? Yeah, so I could take with the e-pawn, but I feel like it's better to take with the knight. Also, you could argue that taking with the knight is better because we keep the d-file open to use against my opponent. You could very easily make that argument. My opponent goes a3. Okay. Well, taking, of course, is the move that I want to play. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is after rook d8, bishop e4 targets my c6 pawn, which is my liability in the position. I suppose I can go rook to a6 to defend it, but I don't really want my rook performing those kinds of defensive duties if I can help it. Oh, no, actually, he can't because I have knight to c4. And then I just facilitate more trades. So that's absolutely fine. Oh, no, my knight's off the board. What am I on about? I'm bugging so hard right now. I am actually bugging. Okay. You can tell that I'm tired. You can tell that I'm tired. Okay. Takes. Could I play f5? It looks weakening, but I'm basically just trying to restrict his bishop. Can I get away with that? Knight e5, I just take it, right? I'm going to take. Rook d8, bishop e4. I could consider rook to a4, and if take, I'm defending b5 and attacking d4 and threatening e5 because of the alignment of the rooks. It feels unnecessary to allow a passed c-pawn, though. I don't see why I would allow that. So f5 looks really tempting. If the knight ever comes in, I'll take it. And if my opponent tries to target my e-pawn, I can always play something like king to f7. And if here, bishop to b3, king f7, rook e8, rook e1, rook e8, that's fine. Although, again, it does feel like I'm offering unnecessary counterplay. So maybe rook d8, bishop e4, rook a6 is fine. Because then I'm still kind of threatening e5. Or maybe even f5 followed by e5. Right? That should be okay. Is there anything better, though? Like, I mean, this doesn't do anything, right? I mean, what am I looking at here? Absolutely nothing. Is the immediate e5? No. I was thinking about e5 immediately, but it makes no sense. Yeah, I'm going to go rook d8. And I'm just going to put my rook on a6. And my thinking is that white doesn't really have any moves. Because the knight can't really advance, because I'll take it. The knight also doesn't have any good squares to go to. Because if it goes to d2, I'll just win his pawn. If it goes to h4, I mean, why are you on h4? That's a silly square. And I suppose what I'm kind of threatening to do is just play the move f5 and boot the bishop and play like king f7, maybe even expand like f5, g5, g4 or something and cause white some problems for his knight. And then maybe e5 could work, you know? But yeah, I think just bishop to a6, which looks passive, but to be fair, although I am defending c6, I'm also controlling the only open file on the board, making it very difficult for white to generate counterplay. Because let's imagine my bishop was somehow on e7, right? Let's just imagine this. Or f6 might make more sense. And I put the rook on c8. Okay, no, let's say bishop to e7. And my rook's on c8. Then maybe white can create counterplay with like rook a1, rook a6, going after my c6 pawn. And it becomes actually quite difficult to defend that. Okay, king e1. I mean, my opponent really can't do anything. And I think this shows white really can't move. Now, the point is, I assume that e5, you can take it because the rook is now defended. Which, of course, makes sense. I could still play f5 if bishop to c2. I have to be a little bit careful about some forks. But there is no rook e1 now because the king is on e1. So it's difficult to exploit e6. That is also true. I could try and go g5, g4, kicking the knight and causing some issues. And if knight to h4, I can try and claim the knight is completely out of the game, which it kind of is. But then white can maybe counterattack with like f3 or h3 and cause some issues to my king. So I don't really want to allow that either. I could try and go f6, e5. That's also an option. And just build it up. I like the look of f5. I'm not 100% convinced this is the best move, but I also don't think it matters too much. I think what I want to do is put my king on f6. I think it's a really nice piece on f6. Defending e6, getting off of this potentially dangerous diagonal, stopping any knight infiltrations, and also protecting the e5 square, and of course the e6 square, so the e5 can come with a bit more venom at the correct moment. That's my thinking. I do have to be a little bit careful, because let's say I get my king to f6 and I go e5, then takes comes with check. And if I take back, I lose my rook. So I do have to be a bit careful, but I like this idea. I like it. Putting the king on f6, I could even try and go g4, g5 again. Sorry, g5, g4. And if the knight goes to h4, there's no access to the g6 square too, which is useful. I could even try and chase the knight with like something like king f6, king g5, and just be really annoying. Okay, h3. I don't really care. Let's go king f6. And I suppose my bishop's kind of in an ideal spot. My rook's in an ideal spot. My king's in an ideal spot. So now this rook. Oh, that's an interesting idea. Fair play. I didn't really consider that. Taking doesn't really make sense. I think g6 makes the most sense. Or even taking with this pawn to open up the e-file. Very interesting. I can probably go rook to a2, though. And if bishop b3, rook b2 is a problem for white. So if here and bishop to b1, maybe still rook b2 going after this pawn. And I mean, take, so what? So what? I suppose maybe the idea is knight e5, because if takes, that comes with check, but I have king e7. Okay, that's fine. Protecting the rook. Do I just go g6 to be solid, or do I attack? I think I attack. I think I attack. Because he's got no way of booting my king. If he goes g5, I just take it. If he goes g4 preparing g5, then I take on g4. Sorry, if he goes h4 preparing g5, I take on g4. And again, this sequence is fine for me because I have king to e7, which is the crucial move, protecting the rook. Because I don't have time to take his rook because I'll be in check. So I think, like I was kind of saying, these pieces are ideally placed to essentially stop all of white's ideas, meaning that this rook can kind of do whatever it wants, and causing chaos on the queen side seems to be the best use for the rook. The only thing I suppose I have to watch out for is, let's say something like bishop d3, rook b2. I don't really want to allow rook a1 if I can help it. That would be my only, like, issue. But it may not actually be that big a deal. I think we'll just see what my opponent plays. If bishop b1, which looks like the most natural move, again, bishop b3, rook b2, you don't have time for this because you just lose your bishop, of course. So bishop b1 looks natural. I could play rook a1 to try and be annoying, but I actually don't threaten anything there. Like, there's not really anything to that. That's just... Unless I'm trying to play e5 and force a trade of rooks because the bishop will be pinged to the king. Maybe? But if I put my rook on a1, if like bishop b1, rook a1, I also lose access to a2. So I can't access the second rank. Unless... Well, actually, if bishop b1, I can just go rook a4. If bishop back to c2 takes rook a1, trying to make use of the a file. Well, firstly, I want to consider rook a3, trying to make use of this alignment. If rook b1... It looks wrong, but it also looks like it maybe holds. Okay, what about rook b2? Where's his... Isn't his bishop just trapped? His bishop's trapped. Yeah, that's just a free bishop. This is meaningless. Because I'll just move my bishop. Or protect my bishop. Or something of the sort. Also, your knight hangs. So, okay, rook d3. I actually completely missed that move. It doesn't really seem to solve the problems, though. Take. E5. I kind of want to play e5. Ooh, wait, can I go rook a8 and just threaten mate? Rook a8. King to f1 trying to go to g2. But then I have rook to a3. And I'm forcing either to win material or trade the rooks. So that looks really nice. And I'm going to play it. This is a big problem for white. I mean, sure, he can block with his rook, but I'll trade rooks. And I'm winning, and I'll win b4. He could also block with the bishop. But again, I will just win b4. And you still have all the same problems. Your bishop sucks. And I may be even threatening to double on the first rank as well. So that also doesn't help you. Knight e5 doesn't do anything because I can just take it, no? Maybe the idea is takes, rook e3 trying to win e6. But I think I can just throw in rook to a1 check first. And I force one of these pieces back, which is problematic for white. Because now, let's say, yeah, okay, the bishop goes. Take. White has no threat. If rook to d6, trying to go after my c6 pawn, probably just rook b1, threatening to trade everything and probably win the king and pawn endgame. If the rook takes, then just check, king moves, and I should easily be able to stop the pawns, I assume. I could again just take the pawn, but then c6 hangs, so that doesn't make any sense. I have to take the knight, right? I've got to get rid of the knight, because that's the best source of counterplay. And then I also have to take back the pawn after the pawn takes the bishop. But yeah, my opponent resigns because there's very little left to do. I mean, the best way I can try to see him creating counterplay is sacrificing the bishop and trying to somehow promote the pawns. But I just don't see it working, because at the very least I'll pick up the b pawn and then put my rook on the c file, and there's just no way you can stop me from winning the c pawn, and then the game is over. So yeah, very interesting game. Hopefully this inspires some of you to try out the Slav defense for yourself. I absolutely love this opening. Hopefully this was a very good video in trying to get you to play it. I also have a Slav defense playlist down below if you want to check that out. And of course, a playlist with the previous episodes of the speedrun. But let's get into the game analysis and see what the computer has to say. Whoa, so the computer gives me 94.9% accuracy. My opponent 84.3, which is also very nice, but it looks like he made a few inaccuracies and one blunder, which I assume was allowing bishop to a6. But let's switch the board position, flip the board, and look at this. So I play c6 on move 2 to try and encourage my opponent to go for Caro, because I love the Caro, but my opponent plays c4, and I have no real better move than to go d5. We have e3, which is definitely a rarity. Most people will play like knight c3 or knight to f3. But my opponent opts for e3, which is fine. It just means this bishop will take longer to get out in the future. But if you've watched my Cambridge Springs video, you will know that it's not quite so simple, because if we go into a normal semi-Slav and white brings out the bishop, then black can play the Cambridge Springs defense, which if you haven't watched that video, go watch it. The Cambridge Springs is unreal. Unreal. So many traps. I love this opening. And this is kind of what I was hoping for today, to be honest. But my opponent spoiled it on a move 3 by playing e3. So you just develop knight f3, knight c3, and e6. Now, bishop f5, I believe, can be played, but things get a little bit tricky. And the computer just actually wants to bring the bishop back to c8. That's how big of a problem the b7 pawn is. I don't want to do that. If the computer says it's plus 2, like 0.3, the computer can say that, but this looks horrific. It looks horrific. So I don't want to play that. I go e6. And I block in my light square bishop, but as we saw in the game, it got out later. It didn't even get out this way. It got out this way. It can get out both ways, depending on if you can play c5, or if you can play b6, or b5, or e5. If you play c5, you can maybe go out this way, or something like, sorry, not c5, b5, followed by like bishop b7, a6, then c5. Essentially, you'll guess out one of the ways, but you're just going to have to wait. So e6, knight f3, bishop d6, bishop d3. And again, yeah, the computer likes taking here and going for a quick b5, bishop b3, bishop a6. I mean, this looks silly. I suppose the point is b4, forcing knight e2, otherwise you'd lose the rook. But it's a strange position. I mean, you can play it, it's just strange. So I castle, knight bd7. Again, I could have taken on c4, but just knight bd7. I wanted to prepare it. But my opponent goes e4, which changes things a bit. The computer actually prefers taking on c4, interestingly. Oh, okay, to play e5. That makes a lot of sense, because if this exchange happens, black is better, because e4 is weak, I suppose. Take. Bishop e3. Knight g4 is apparently a problem. The Slav's good. You will break out and get interesting positions and maybe even be better. But I took on e4 because I thought, well, I can trade everything, go knight f6, and I should be happy. The computer again wanted a quicker c5 here, but I think I was concerned about the immediate bishop g5, and I thought that this was a little bit concerning with queen to d6, d3 on the way. Maybe I shouldn't have been so concerned about that, but I was. So instead, I played h6 preemptively, and c5 from my opponent, which is not the correct idea. Better would have been knight to e5. And if I were to take this, then the issue is that my bishop sucks. And if I go knight to d7 attacking the pawn, f4, how am I getting out of this position? The material may be equal, queens may be off the board, but these bishops are good. And all of my pieces suck, essentially, particularly this bishop. So you got to be careful. My opponent goes c5 though. Oh, and by the way, if knight to e5, again, I can't take, so I'd have to play something like c5 here. And of course you can't take because of take. So, typical Slav stuff. But c5, I go bishop c7, and I'm basically like, look, why on earth is your pawn here? You have a massive hole on d5, which we of course later exploited by putting our queen there, and then our knight there. Yeah. Queen d3 is just an inaccuracy. Better was b3 or a4, apparently. Queen d3, of course, it looks natural, but there's also no threat. There's no threat. And what I was saying during the game is, let's say I played a nothing move. Like, it's actually hard to play a nothing move. But let's say queen d7. Knight e5 also doesn't work. Because the point would be, well, if my pawn takes and I'm attacking your knight, and if your knight moves, then whoops, that's mate. Yeah, but I can just take your queen. And then move my knight. And I'm actually winning a pawn here. So, That's pretty good. But the point is, I trade the queens and then move the knight, so there's no mate. But we just go b6, which is the best move. And this is really problematic. Really problematic, because if you take... Okay, ab6 is apparently the move. Oh, yeah, because this is now still a threat, and we have eyes on a2. c5 could also be played in the future, and black's position comes alive very, very quickly. The d-pawn is also isolated, which is another problem with playing c5. b4 from my opponent, again, looks very natural, but a5, the only move to keep the advantage for black. Of course, my opponent here blundered with bishop to d2. The move I was expecting, which is the best move, is cb6. The idea being that I can't go bishop to a6, because bc7 I can't take because of this. So, if this, I would have taken back, and my opponent can take here. I'll probably take with the rook, because my bishop's nice on this diagonal. You can go bishop d2, maybe, although there is bishop to a6 there, which is interesting. But the point is that let's just say we get something really simple here, which isn't necessarily the best moves, but let's just put them on the board. I have eyes on a2. d4 is weak. My c-pawn is weak, but it's also tough for you to really exploit that. And let's say all these pawns get liquidated, which isn't unlikely. That is not unlikely for all these pawns to come off the board. Then I'm just a pawn up in an endgame that only I can win, right? And my bishops, again, can come alive very, very quickly. So my opponent, of course, blundered, and we take full advantage with bishop to a6. Literally just a simple skewer. I might have been calling it a fork. It's a skewer. Queen to b3. Of course, we just take. King takes was a bit interesting. I thought rook takes made more sense, but okay. And ab4. I think queen to d5 I wanted to play, but I thought my opponent just went queen d3. The computer wants to take and open this up, but can you do this first? Apparently not. But anyway, I take on b4 first, which is apparently the best move, but it's probably all a very similar evaluation. Again, I was expecting my opponent to take on b6 here to complicate matters, but he didn't. Here, okay, b5 is an inaccuracy. Interesting. I would argue it maybe actually made my life easier. Now, I did see the top computer recommendation with taking bishop takes and bishop to d6. I did see this. And I thought that if bishop to b6, trying to decline a trade, I have queen c8, which the computer quite likes. Just a decent square for the queen. There's also rook to a3, which I didn't see, which is maybe an idea in some of these lines. But I thought b5 was actually far simpler. Now, my opponent here went rook d1, which was not the right idea. a3 was better, so that queen d5 didn't come with a threat on the pawn. That's also difficult to see, though. He went rook d1, and I went queen d5. And the problem is, if you decline the trade, there is queen c4, apparently, but I can also just take on a2. And now I'm up a pawn and an exchange. My knight still can't come to d5 because of this, but I mean, white is pretty much busted. Sorry, I said I was tired. But white's pretty much busted because he doesn't have counterplay. And queen c4... Actually, no, queen c4 makes way more sense because this forces a queen trade. Not only am I attacking the bishop, but I'm also pinning the queen to the king. And this should be pretty winnable. This pawn is surprisingly hard for white to win as well. But, okay. Queen d5, my opponent takes. We go knight takes d5. Yes, okay, awesome. I was haggling between these two moves. I thought e takes makes sense because the c-pawn is no longer weak and I can go rook e8 and I dominate both open files. But I felt like it was harder to break through because white can try and be very stubborn with a3. Or maybe even bishop to b1. But I take with the knight, which is the correct decision, because I felt like it was easier to calculate as well, because clearly the only move here is a3. Anything else, like if you move the bishop, I will just take. And this doesn't do anything, because, I mean, if this... Why are you helping me? You can try and go rook e1 to stop me going rook e8, but I'm just going to go here. And if you go rook e7... I mean, worst case scenario, couldn't I just do this? The computer wants rook fc8, which I don't really understand. Oh, you're just going to go king to f8 to boot the rook. And if rook d7, then king e8. Okay, that makes sense. a3. Taking isn't the best move. Bishop a5 is better. I didn't play this because I didn't want to allow a knight to e5 idea at the correct moment. Let's say something like take knight e5. There is rook c8 to be fair, and this pawn is just weak. And if rook here, I can boot the knight and double up. I felt like knight takes was easier because rook fd8, I was toying with a few ideas in this position, but I went for rook fd8, which the computer likes. Bishop e4, and I thought just rook a6, and like, white has nothing. And I have all the time in the world. f5, booting the bishop, best move. King f7 isn't the best move, but I think it's very simple, because this is a very easy plan. h3, king f6. Again, not the best move, but very easy. g4, now we go rook a2. And my opponent goes bishop to b3, which kind of baffled me, because we just go rook b2. I admittedly missed rook to d3 for some reason. I don't know why I missed that. But it doesn't help. It doesn't help. We have so many ways to win this position, but the most simple, amongst everything, is just rook to a8. And how are you stopping this? This is a problem. My opponent, of course, played knight e5, which makes sense, but just rook a1. If you block with the rook, I will have obviously trade with you, and then I will trade here, and then this will fall, and then I'll probably sack my rook for your bishop and win the king and pawn endgame. So rook d1, bishop e5, and here my opponent resigned. I thought his best chance was rook to d6, and after rook b to b1 to take on c6, give up the bishop, and somehow try and cause problems with the c-pawn. It doesn't work, and the computer, I think, wants to create some kind of mating net, which is pretty funny. I don't really see why that's necessary, but okay. You can't take this because of this, obviously. But yeah, my opponent resigned because, realistically, the only way for him to create counterplay would be to give me a full rook up, which I should convert at this level. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see that opening that I was on about before, the Cambridge Springs, which, if I can get back to where I wanted to go to, here, this is a very common line you'll get in the Semi-Slav, or the Queen's Gambit declined. It's awesome. Check the video out here. It'll be linked up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, then check out the playlist down here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.